Right now, as you're listening to my voice, I am standing at the edge of my parents' driveway watching two strangers carry my mother's china cabinet into the back of a moving truck she doesn't own anymore. My father's pacing on the front lawn in his socks, my mother's crying into a tea towel, and my sister Emily is on the porch, arms folded, staring at me like I just set the house on fire with my bare hands. Technically, I didn't. All I did was sign a few pieces of paper. Okay, quite a few pieces of paper. And if you've ever been the responsible one in your family, the one whose name magically shows up on every bill, every contract, every "we'll just use you as backup," sweetheart, document. Then you already know. Sometimes a pen is a lot more powerful than a match. Before I tell you exactly how I ended up selling my parents' house out from under them, I want you to do something for me. Pause for a second and drop your city or country in the comments. I love seeing where everyone's watching from. And hit that subscribe button if you've ever felt more like your family's emergency fund than their family member. Because honestly, that's what I was. For 28 years. I'm Renata, by the way. I'm 28 now. And this whole story, it starts way, way before the moving trucks and the legal notices. It starts with a pattern. You know that role you get assigned in your family when you're like 8, and no one ever sends out a memo, but somehow everybody just agrees who you're going to be forever. Yeah, Emily, my little sister, got to be the delicate, gifted, chronically misunderstood artist. I got to be the one who knew where the insurance cards were. Growing up, our house kind of ran on this unspoken rule. Emily's feelings are a natural disaster, and I'm FEMA. When Emily melted down because Mom bought the wrong brand of pencils for her latest project, I was the one apologizing on everyone's behalf and running to the store. When Emily failed her first semester of college because she forgot that attending class was mandatory, Dad called me to talk to her about being more responsible. Not her academic advisor, not the financial aid office. Me. Meanwhile, I had a part-time job, a full course load, and a car with more rust than paint that I bought myself. Emily had an iPhone she couldn't afford, an endless stream of emergency cash from my parents, and a bedroom she never had to clean because she's so overwhelmed right now. If any of this is hitting a little too close to home, stay with me. It gets worse. And then it gets much, much better. From the outside, we looked normal enough. Middle-class family, small town, Sunday dinners, birthday parties, all of that. But inside my head, it felt like I lived at work. Emotional work, practical work. Invisible, unpaid, never acknowledged work. You're good with paperwork, Renata. You're so organized, Renata. You're just better with money than Emily. That last one was my parents' favorite. My dad would say it like it was a compliment, usually right after asking if I could just put it on your card and we'll sort it out later. Spoiler, later never came. So yeah, I grew up with this lovely little identity, the financially competent daughter who would always step in. By the time I was 24, I had a teaching job, a decent little car, a tiny savings account I was weirdly proud of, and a fiancé who at the time I thought was the safest decision I'd ever made. Enter David. He was one of those guys who just radiated dependability. You know the type, wore the same 2 jackets all winter, had a spreadsheet for everything, actually read the fine print on gym memberships. We met at a friend's board game night. Not romantic, I know, but I guess there's something kind of adorable about watching a guy quietly correct everyone's math in Monopoly. He worked in finance, client accounts at a mid-sized firm, and he loved that I had my life together. Most girls my age are still figuring things out, he said once over coffee. You already have a career, savings, a plan. It's refreshing. I took that as a compliment back then. Now, with hindsight, I hear it differently. What he meant was, you're low maintenance. You won't cost me anything. Emily, of course, thought he was boring at first. An accountant? She snorted when I showed her our engagement photos. Wow, Ren. Really living on the edge there. Do you guys get wild and balance your budget on Friday nights? This, coming from a woman who once overdrafted her bank account buying crystals from an Instagram healer. My parents liked him instantly. Of course they did. Stable job, polite, nice handshake, the kind of man who brought a bottle of supermarket wine and called my mother ma'am. He'll be a good provider, my dad said after the first dinner. For who, though? I remember thinking. But I was in love. And I was tired. Tired of carrying everything on my own. Tired of being the only adult in rooms full of people who were technically older than me. So when David said, let's get married and build a life together, I said yes. And for a while, it was fine. We had a small wedding, a short honeymoon, and then we moved into a 1-bedroom apartment near my school. I taught 2nd grade, he handled retirement accounts for clients, and our biggest argument was whether we should get a cat. A debate I lost, by the way, because pets are expensive. And what if we travel? We didn't travel. Not once. The first real crack in the facade didn't come from David. It came from my parents' kitchen table. They'd invited us over for dinner one Saturday night. Nothing unusual about that. Except when we walked in, there were printed documents neatly stacked at my dad's seat, and Emily was miraculously home, which never happened on weekends unless there was free food or drama. Don't freak out, my mom said before I'd even taken my shoes off. Pro tip: when someone in your family says that, you should absolutely freak out. Dad cleared his throat in that very serious head-of-the-house way. We've been doing some thinking about the future, he began. Emily rolled her eyes. He means about the house. Now, this house. It wasn't some grand estate or anything. Just a slightly tired 3-bedroom with peeling paint and a sagging porch. The one I grew up in, the one I left for college swearing I was never moving back into. My parents loved that house like it was a 5th family member. They'd remortgaged it twice that I knew of. Once to help Emily with school, once to cover some business idea of my dad's that never made it past the planning stage. We're not getting any younger, Mom said, fiddling with her necklace. Your father's back isn't what it used to be. The stairs are getting hard. We've decided, Dad jumped in, that instead of selling or ending up in some retirement home, we'd like to turn this into a multi-generational place. You know, family compound sort of thing. I blinked. Eh? What? Emily smirked. He's been watching those homesteading videos again. Dad shot her a look. It makes sense, actually. You and David could move in, take the upstairs, Emily could have the basement for her studio, and we'd all share the main floor. Everyone chips in, keeps costs down, keeps the family together. I felt David stiffen beside me in the rickety kitchen chair. Dad, our apartment is closer to work, I started. And we just signed a lease. Leases can be broken, Mom said gently. It's just, with interest rates the way they are, and your good credit, sweetheart, there it was. The magic phrase, your good credit. Because here's what they'd already figured out. Long before this kitchen table ambush, my parents couldn't afford to refinance again on their own. Emily's credit score was somewhere between yikes and, are you okay? And me? I'd spent years being careful, paying on time, saying no to things I couldn't afford. I could hear the math they'd done in their heads long before I walked through the door. What? Exactly? Are you asking? I said slowly. Dad pushed the stack of papers toward me. We talked to Margaret, our longtime neighbor and now apparently their unofficial financial advisor. And she said if you and David went in as co-borrowers on a new mortgage, we could do some renovations. Add that upstairs kitchenette, fix the roof, maybe even update the kitchen. It would increase the value for everyone. A family investment. Emily swung her legs under the table. Plus, we could finally turn the garage into my studio. I could actually start my online gallery properly. Do you have any money to put into this? I asked her. Her mouth opened. Closed? Well, not yet, she said. But I will, once things take off. Of course. I looked at David, silently begging him to say, this is too much. This isn't her responsibility. Instead, he gave me this earnest Boy Scout smile. Honestly, Ren, from an investment perspective, it's not a terrible idea. Property values have been rising in this area. If we help now, we all benefit later. We all. Funny how those two words can mean you pay and we enjoy. I wish I could tell you I stood up right then and there and said, absolutely not. I didn't. I asked for time to think. I took the papers home. I ran numbers. I talked to a colleague whose husband was a realtor. I lay awake at night, listening to David talk about long-term equity. And underneath all of that, I heard something else. My mother's voice, from when I was 16 and wanted to move out for university instead of commuting from home. You're so ungrateful. We do everything for you and you can't even consider what we need? So I did what eldest daughters all over the world do. I ignored the knot in my stomach. I said yes. We broke our lease. We moved back into my childhood home. For the first few months, it wasn't hell. Just cramped. David and I had the upstairs, 1 bedroom, a small sitting room that smelled perpetually like old carpet, and a bathroom with water pressure that either tried to peel your skin off or dripped like a sad faucet. Emily took over the basement. Literally. She painted one wall black for contrast, stuck thrift store mirrors everywhere, and started calling it my studio loft, like she wasn't living rent-free under her parents' kitchen. My parents stayed in the master bedroom downstairs, and the main floor turned into common territory, which is a polite way of saying I did dishes for 5 people instead of 2, and we argued about fridge space a lot. We split the mortgage according to income, which in practice meant David and I paid most of it. Utilities? You kids can handle that, right? Our pensions don't stretch like they used to. Groceries? Mom insisted on doing the shopping and then forgetting to ask us for money until we offered. If I don't remind you, you never pay me back, she'd say, handwritten list of what you owe in hand. Except when I added it up, it was always higher than anything I'd actually eaten. I started keeping my own list in a little notebook just to stay sane. At first, Emily said she'd contribute by taking on more of the caregiving stuff, which, translated, meant she'd sometimes drive Mom to doctor appointments and then post about it on Instagram like she'd performed open-heart surgery. The resentment built slowly, quietly, like lime scale in a kettle. There were 100 small moments that, on their own, were just annoying. But stacked together, they became this massive, immovable thing between us. Like the time Emily borrowed my sweater and left paint all over the sleeves. "It's just acrylic," she said, shrugging. "It'll probably wash out." Or the time David and my dad looked over a stack of bills together, my bills from the joint account, and decided that I was overspending on little treats because I'd bought myself a pair of running shoes. "You know, if you cut back a bit," David told me later, "we could put more toward the principal each month." I stared at him. "David, we already pay nearly everything. Your parents pay like gas for the car and Netflix. They're on fixed incomes," he reminded me, "and Em's trying to get her business off the ground. We're in the best position to help." That line? We're in the best position to help. It was like the family motto I'd never agreed to. If you're watching this and your blood pressure is already going up, take a breath. Because the thing that finally snapped me out of this mess wasn't one huge betrayal. It was a combination of two seemingly small ones, plus a group chat. Oh yeah, there's always a group chat. About 2 years after we moved in, Dad had a minor stroke. He recovered fairly well, but it scared all of us. And by all of us, I mean it gave my mother a new sharp-edged weapon: guilt. "We just don't know how long we've got," she'd say, eyes wide and watery. "I lie awake at night worrying what will happen to Emily when we're gone. She doesn't have your stability, Renata. She's not like you." It always came back to that. Emily's fragility. One Sunday, I came home from grading papers at a cafe to find all of them at the kitchen table again. Mom, Dad, Emily, and David this time, with a grim concentration on his face that I recognized from tax season. My stomach flipped. "What's going on?" Mom smiled too brightly. "We were just going over some estate planning." There were more documents on the table, but these looked even more official. Lots of thick, creamy paper and blue ink signatures. Margaret's name was at the top of one. Dad gestured for me to sit. "We've been talking about the future again. Emily's future, specifically." "Why just Emily's?" I asked, sitting down but not touching the papers. "Don't be like that," Emily huffed. "You know you'll always land on your feet." "I won't." "We want to make sure," Dad continued, "that no matter what happens, Emily has somewhere to live. That this house can't be taken away from her if, say, your marriage doesn't work out, or something else unexpected happens." I looked at David. He avoided my eyes. "There's been talk," Mom said slowly, of, simplifying the deed, so that officially the house passes directly to Emily when we're gone. "Simplifying the deed," I repeated. "What does that mean?" Dad pushed one paper toward me. "It would just adjust the percentages a bit, sweetheart. You and David have already got your own careers, your own savings. Emily doesn't have that kind of security." I scanned the page. I'm not a lawyer, but even I could see it. My ownership share dropping from 50% to some vague residual interest. Theirs and Emily's slicing up the rest. "Adjust the percentages," I said slowly, as in, give Emily most of my stake now? "It's just on paper," Dad said quickly. "Nothing would change day to day. It's just, legal protection." David finally spoke. "It's also for tax reasons, Ren. We've all been talking and—" "We?" I cut in. "You've all been talking about my share of the house without me?" The silence was very loud. My face went hot. "So let me get this straight. I put my credit, my income, my actual cash on the line for this place. I left an apartment I liked. I've been paying the lion's share of the mortgage and bills for 2 years. And now you want me to sign a document that basically says, never mind, it was mostly for Emily?" Emily rolled her eyes. "You're being so dramatic." No one said, "Never mind. You'll still get something. You always do." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "What exactly do I always get, Em?" Mom's voice went low. "Renata, darling, this is how families help each other. When we're gone, you'll be fine. Emily won't. You know that. We're just trying to make sure she doesn't end up homeless. And there it was, the trump card. If you don't do this, your baby sister might end up on the street. And it will be your fault. I did not sign that day. I said my head hurt. I took the papers to review. I shut myself in our upstairs room and stared at them until the words blurred. David came up after a while, hesitant. You okay? No, I said, too tired to sugarcoat it. Are you seriously on board with this? He sighed. Look, from a pure logic standpoint, it's not ideal, I know. But they're your parents, Ren. And Emily, she's obviously never going to have our earning potential. We'll still have the equity we've built. It's just structuring it differently. Our equity? I repeated. Or mine? He frowned. What's that supposed to mean? Who signed the original loan application? I asked. We both did. He said. Who paid the down payment? He hesitated. You did. Who's been covering almost all the mortgage because your student loans kept eating your half? He winced. Okay, but that's... No. David, you keep saying we and ours, but when it comes to sacrificing, it's always me. He rubbed his temples. You're blowing this way out of proportion. Right. Of course. The family mantra's cousin. You're overreacting. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. What I did was way more dangerous. I got very, very quiet. And then, this is where things tilted. I reached out to the one family member who had never quite fit the script either. My cousin Rachel. Rachel was the black sheep in all the ways Emily thought she was, but wasn't. She'd moved to the city at 19, worked 3 jobs, put herself through nursing school, married a woman my parents pretended was just her roommate, and only came back for Christmas if there was free wine. She also had a front row seat to the extended family gossip, which is how I found out about the group chat. We met at a coffee shop halfway between her hospital and my school. I brought the documents, she brought her bullshit detector. Jesus, she muttered, flipping through the pages. They really went for it. Am I crazy? I asked. She looked up. No, but they're counting on you thinking you are. I laughed then, unexpectedly. It bubbled up, half hysterical. That tracks. Rachel took a cautious sip of her coffee. So, speaking of them counting on things, there's something else you should know. My stomach clenched. What? My mum, your mum, Aunt Teresa, a few others, they call it the girls. Okay? They've been talking about this house situation for months. About how lucky you are to have David, and how, quote, if we play our cards right, Emily will be secure and Renata won't mind because she's so practical. I felt like someone had poured cold water down my back. Play our cards right. Rachel winced. There was also a thing your mum said. I almost didn't tell you, but honestly, after seeing these papers, she tapped them. You need the full picture. Just say it, I whispered. She called you, and I'm quoting here, our walking credit score. Emily added a laughing emoji. I sat very still. Walking, credit, score. Not daughter, not person. Asset, tool, resource. Rachel reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I'm sorry. I know that hurts. It did. More than I wanted to admit. That night, back in my childhood bedroom that was now my marital bedroom, I lay awake next to a man who couldn't understand why I was suddenly so distant. Because how do you explain to someone that your whole life has just rearranged itself into a truth you can't unsee? I had always known, on some level, that my family valued what I could do for them more than they valued me, but seeing it in black and white, on legal documents, in text messages, in my cousin's reluctant eyes, was like having the curtain yanked open so I did something I'd never done before in my entire life. I put myself first. Quietly, but very deliberately. The next morning, instead of signing anything, I called a lawyer, not Margaret, my parents' buddy. An actual tenants and property specialist recommended by one of the other teachers at school. Her name was Lila. She wore no-nonsense glasses and had this calm, dry sense of humor that immediately made me feel like my house wasn't the only one on fire. After I explained everything, the mortgage, the adjusted deed, the guilt trips, the text messages, she leaned back in her chair and said, so basically they're trying to pressure you into gifting away your majority interest under the guise of future planning. Yes. And your husband is neutral? More like softly on their side, I admitted. She nodded slowly. Okay. Good news first, you haven't signed anything yet, which means right now, on paper, you're still a co-owner, with a strong financial trail showing you've been the primary contributor. And the bad news? She shrugged. The bad news is emotional, not legal. They're going to make you feel like the villain if you don't go along with this. But from a legal standpoint, you have options. She outlined them. Option 1, refuse to sign and hope they eventually drop it. Spoiler, they wouldn't. Option 2, negotiate a formal agreement in which, if I did give up some future interest, I'd be compensated now, like actually paid based on current value in my contributions. I could already hear my parents browning out at the word paid. Option 3, the nuclear one. As a co-owner, I could petition the court to force a sale of the property and divide the proceeds fairly. I stared at her. You mean I could sell the house even if they don't want to? Yeah, she said, matter of fact. It's called a partition action. Messy, emotionally. But absolutely possible. My father's recliner, Emily's stupid loft. I thought about being their walking credit score. Then I asked another question I never thought I'd say out loud. And what if I don't want to stay married to someone who helped them plan this? Lila's eyes softened just a fraction. Then we talk about financial infidelity. Because it turned out David hadn't just been nodding along in those meetings out of politeness. While I'd been obsessing over the deed, I'd almost missed an even bigger problem. Remember that line of credit? The one the bank kept sending statements about that I assumed David was managing because he's the money guy? Yeah, he'd quietly increased it. And used it. Extensively. Not on drugs or gambling or something dramatic like that. Oh, no. On family. On paying off one of Emily's maxed-out credit cards. On covering the temporary gap when my parents' car insurance bounced. On investing in Emily's new website, which she designed with a friend who accepted just cash, no receipts, babe. All without telling me. I found out because Lila, bless her meticulous heart, asked to see every financial document tied to the house. Every. Single. One. Did you authorize this? She asked, pointing at the increased limit and the recent transactions. My mouth went dry. I didn't even know it was raised. That's a problem, she said gently. And, potentially, grounds for divorce. Look, I didn't marry David thinking I'd ever sit across from a lawyer discussing exit strategies, okay? He wasn't a monster, he wasn't screaming or hitting or cheating. He was just spineless, complicit, the kind of person who would quietly sign my name away to keep the peace. But here's the thing no one tells you. Betrayal doesn't have to be loud to be devastating. Sometimes it looks like your husband nodding while your parents explain how to make sure you don't end up with too much. Sometimes it looks like him signing your financial future away with a ballpoint pen and a sorry smile. So, step by step, document by document, I started taking my life back. First, I opened a new bank account in my name only. My paycheck started going there. I left just enough in the joint account to cover automatic payments, so no one would notice right away. Then I started keeping receipts, every mortgage transfer, every utility payment, every grocery shop I actually paid for. They went into a folder labeled House Contributions. At school, between lesson plans and parent emails, I wrote a timeline. When we moved in, who paid what, which renovations I'd funded. Lila called it contemporaneous notes. I called it therapy. And slowly a plan formed. Not the nuclear option, at least not at first. I'm not heartless. I didn't want to just show up one day with a court order and a real estate agent, but I also wasn't going to keep playing the role they'd written for me. So when the next round of guilt-laced estate talk started up, I was ready. It came, fittingly, at a Sunday dinner. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, some weird kale thing Emily was experimenting with that tasted like pond water. Have you had a chance to look at the papers? Mom asked casually as she passed me the salt. I have, I said, and I've talked to someone about them, actually. Dad's fork paused mid-air. Someone? A lawyer, I said. Her name's Lila. She specializes in property and family financial stuff. The silence was sharp. You got a lawyer? Emily said, incredulous. For a family matter? I set the salt down. You got a lawyer first. Margaret drafted those documents. I'm just making sure I'm not being pressured into signing away a major asset without proper advice. My mother's face did this awful tight thing. Pressured? Renata, how could you even think? Because, I cut in, you referred to me as your walking credit score in the family group chat. Color drained from her cheeks. You, what? Rachel, I love you, but subtle you are not. My dad frowned. That's taken out of context. Is there a context where that's not insulting? I asked, my voice shaking a little despite my best efforts. You don't talk about a person that way. You talk about a bank account that way. And that is exactly how you've treated me. David tried to interject. Ren, let's just calm down and… No, I said, turning to him. You don't get to calm down me. Not when you quietly increased our line of credit to bail everyone out and never thought to mention it. His expression froze. You went through my emails? Actually, I said, holding up the statement, Lila did. But thanks for confirming it's yours. Emily pushed her chair back. Wow. So now you're spying on us? This is actually insane. I laughed. I couldn't help it. The idea of me, the queen of transparency, being called sneaky by a woman who once forgot she'd used my social security number to sign up for a credit card. Spying? I repeated. No. This is me waking up. Mom's voice went high and wobbly. We just wanted to make sure Emily would be okay. You know she's not like you. And something inside me finally snapped. You keep saying that, I said slowly. You've said it my entire life. Emily's not like me. Emily can't do this. Emily will never manage that. And somehow, that has always meant I have to do more. For her. For you. For everyone. I rearranged my life to move back here. I poured my savings into this house. I've been subsidizing 3 other adults while you all plan how to cut me out of the one thing I helped you keep. You want to talk about family? Family doesn't treat one member like a safety net and then act shocked when she doesn't want to be walked on anymore. I stood up, legs shaking. So here's what's going to happen. I'm not signing those papers. Ever. The deed stays as is unless we make changes that fairly reflect my contributions. And if you keep trying to guilt me into giving Emily everything, then I will file for a partition sale. I will force a sale of this house and we will divide the money according to the actual numbers. Not your magic fairy tale math. Emily's eyes went wide. You'd make your own parents homeless? No, I said quietly. You did that when you started planning how to steal from me behind my back. I didn't slam the door when I left. I didn't throw my napkin. I just walked upstairs, packed an overnight bag, grabbed my folder of documents, and drove to Rachel's place. That night, on her lumpy couch with her cat, somehow managing to sleep on my face, I made 2 more decisions. 1. I was going to follow through if they pushed me. I wasn't bluffing. 2. I was done being married to a man who found it easier to betray me silently than to risk an awkward conversation with my parents. The divorce part moved faster than I expected. Financial infidelity, Lila explained, isn't just about secret affairs with people. It's about secret affairs with money. Opening accounts behind your partner's back. Taking out debt they don't know about. Using shared assets for other people's benefit without consent. When David got served, his first reaction wasn't rage. It was disbelief. You're divorcing me over a line of credit, he said, standing on the curb outside Rachel's apartment building, papers in hand. I'm divorcing you over a pattern, I said. The credit was just the clearest example on paper. He looked genuinely wounded. I thought we were a team, but teams don't bench one player and then bet their entire season on her stats. He moved back in with my parents temporarily to save money. Which, honestly, perfect. Let them all cuddle up in the house together while I and my supposedly excessive boundaries lived elsewhere. Meanwhile, Lila quietly set the partition process in motion. It wasn't quick. There were filings, appraisals, mediations. My parents stalled, huffed, tried to convince the mediator I was being hysterical. At one point, my mother actually said, "She's just mad we made her share with her sister like when they were kids," and I had to bite my lip so hard not to laugh that I tasted blood. But here's the thing about hard facts. They're boring and relentless. My payment records. The increased value of the house since we refinanced. The line of credit used primarily for my parents' and Emily's benefit. The mediator saw it. The judge saw it. My family somehow still didn't. They kept thinking this was about feelings, about how much I loved them. It wasn't. It was about what I was willing to fund. The court ordered the house sold. We had a few options, one of them buying the others out or selling to a third party, but none of them could qualify for a new mortgage on their own. Emily's debt alone sank that ship. So that's it? Dad said on the phone, voice flat. You win? It's not about winning, I said. It's about me not losing everything so Emily can have a forever playroom. He hung up. The day the house officially went on the market, my mother left 3 voicemails in a row about memories. And how could you? And I never expected this from my own daughter. I listened to them once, cried in my car for 10 minutes, then blocked her number. Rachel became my unofficial communicator. They're furious, she reported one night over takeout. Emily says she's literally an orphan. Interesting definition of orphan, I said, picking at my noodles. When the house finally sold, after too many showings and one buyer who tried to lowball us because of the ugly basement paint, Lila called me into her office with the final breakdown. "You're looking at a significant amount here," she said, sliding the numbers across the desk. "Based on your share after paying off the mortgage and the line of credit, this will be your portion." I stared. It was more money than I had ever seen in my own name. "How significant?" I asked, my voice small. "Significant enough to start over comfortably somewhere else," she said, "without needing anyone's signature but your own." I walked out of that office lightheaded. On the way home at that point being a tiny sublet Rachel had found me, I stopped in front of a travel agency. Yes, those still exist, kind of. This one specialized in relocations. I stood there, looking at pictures of other cities in the window. Seattle, Boston, Austin, Vancouver, London. I'd spent 28 years making sure everyone around me could stay exactly where they were, emotionally and literally. For the first time, I wondered what it would feel like to leave. Not just my parents' house, not just my marriage, my entire assigned identity. Responsible Renata, reliable Renata, walking credit score Renata. What if I became just Renata? I went home, opened my laptop, and started searching teaching jobs. Relocation package. 3 weeks later, I accepted an offer from a private school in Vancouver. Smaller classes, better pay, coastal views, and an administration that seemed weirdly excited about my ideas for project-based learning. The hiring principal asked me, "What made you decide to move?" I said, "I realized I was doing a great job taking care of everyone except myself." She nodded like she'd heard that before. By the time the house sale closed and the funds landed in my brand new solely my name bank account, I had a plane ticket, a rental agreement for a little one-bedroom near the seawall, and a resignation letter printed for my current school. I also had to do one last thing. The movers in my parents' driveway, they were part of that. Legally, once the house belonged to the new owners, my parents and Emily had a set date to be out. They ignored it, of course. "The new people can wait," Emily said, flipping her hair, except legally they couldn't. The buyers opted not to get involved in the drama themselves. Instead, their lawyer contacted Lila. Lila contacted me. "Do you want to handle this quietly?" she asked. So I did. I hired movers to come on the final day of occupancy. I showed up with the keys, the paperwork, and a polite but firm smile. "Renata, what are you doing?" my mother cried as the movers rolled up that iconic china cabinet. "Making sure you don't get sued for trespassing," I said, handing her the official notice. Today was the deadline. "I told you that 3 times. Emily stood on the porch, arms crossed, glaring. "You're enjoying this." I looked at her. Really looked. No artist's filter, no poor misunderstood baby, just a 26-year-old woman who had spent her entire life expecting other people to pick up the tab. "I'm not," I said quietly. "But I'm not going to feel guilty about enforcing basic boundaries anymore." Dad shuffled over, face red. "After everything we've done for you," I interrupted him for the first time in my life. "You raised me. That was your job. I paid you back in mortgages and groceries and second chances. We're square." He stared at me like he didn't recognize me. Maybe he didn't. Maybe for the first time ever I wasn't the version of me that fit his story. I didn't stay to watch them leave. I handed the keys to the buyer, wished them luck with the noisy neighbors, and drove away. 2 weeks later, I got on a plane with 2 suitcases, a box of old photos, my grandmother's ring, and my entire checking account balance. Vancouver was gray and damp, and unbelievably beautiful. The air smelled like salt and coffee. My new apartment was small, but it was mine. All mine. Every lamp, every spoon, every rent payment. No shared utility spreadsheets, no passive-aggressive post-its on the fridge. My first morning there, I sat on the floor with a mug of tea and watched the rain bead on the window. No one burst in to ask if I could co-sign anything. My phone, which I'd unblocked briefly for the move, buzzed with a string of messages from unknown numbers. Extended family I barely knew suddenly declaring that family is everything, and blood is thicker than water. If blood is thicker than water, I thought, why have I always felt like I was drowning? I turned the phone face down, finished my tea, and walked to the seawall. I wish I could tell you everything was perfect immediately. It wasn't. I got lonely. I missed my students from my old school. I cried in the grocery store once because a kid who looked like Emily at 8 ran past me laughing. David emailed me twice, then 4 times, then called from a blocked number. His messages went from, "We can fix this," to, "I was just trying to help them," to, "I'm sorry I messed up," to, "You're heartless." I didn't respond to any of them, not because I was being petty, because there was truly nothing left to say. The last email he sent, at least the last one I read, said, "I hope you're happy without us." And you know what? I am. It took a while, but happiness stopped being this fragile, guilty thing I felt only when everyone else was okay. It became quiet mornings by the water before school. Afternoons spent planning lessons I was excited about instead of grading papers at my parents' kitchen table while someone shouted in the background. It became friends I made here who knew me as just Renata, not the responsible one, not Emily's big sister, just a woman who likes true crime podcasts, oversalts her pasta water, and gets way too invested in school play auditions. I told one of my new colleagues, Sarah, the short version, one day after work, moved here after a messy family house situation and divorce. Long story. And she just said, "Wow, that's a lot. I'm glad you're here now." Just glad you're here. Months later, Rachel visited. We walked along the seawall, hair sticking to our faces in the wind, and she filled me in. My parents were renting a small 2-bedroom near our old neighborhood. They complained constantly about the tiny kitchen and ridiculous rent prices. Emily was working at a craft store temporarily while she tried to rebuild her art thing. "They still talk about you," Rachel said. "Sometimes it's anger, sometimes it's this weird nostalgic sadness, like you died or something." I snorted. "I did die. Their version of me did. Would you ever go back?" she asked softly. "For a visit?" "No, for them, for family, to fix things." I thought about it. Really thought. "No," I said finally. "I'm open to individual conversations if they ever take responsibility. But the system, the roles, the expectations, that's done. I'm not signing up for that show again." She looped her arm through mine. "Good. I like this version of you. She's got boundaries and a passport." We laughed, and the sound was real, not brittle. So, if you're still here, watching and listening, and maybe seeing yourself in way too many of these moments, here's what I want you to take from my very long, very messy story. You're not a bad daughter or sister or partner, because you won't light yourself on fire to keep everyone else warm. You're not selfish for asking, "What do I actually want?" instead of automatically saying, "Sure, I'll help," every time someone hands you their crisis. And you're definitely not heartless for walking away from people who only see you as a resource. I spent 28 years believing love meant being endlessly useful. Now I know love, real love, healthy love, doesn't require you to bankrupt yourself emotionally or financially. As for my parents, we email occasionally now. Surface-level stuff. Weather, recipes, no talk of money, no talk of moving back. Emily sent me a DM a few months ago. It said, "I got my own place, tiny studio, paying for it myself. I'm exhausted. But I kind of get it now. How much you did. I'm sorry. I stared at it for a long time. I haven't replied yet. Maybe I will someday. Maybe I won't. Forgiveness is a gift I'm still deciding how to give out. But here's the twist I didn't expect. I don't wish them harm. I don't lie awake hoping they suffer. I just don't center them in my life anymore. I center me. And that, after a lifetime of being everyone's backup plan, feels like the wildest revenge of all. If this story hit you in that spot between your ribs where all the old family stuff lives, do me a favor, hit that like button so more people can find it, and subscribe to Revenge Diary for more stories like this. And share this with the friend who's always the responsible one, the friend who's constantly bailing everyone out, the one who needs to hear that it's okay to put the pen down and stop signing away her life. I'm Renata. I'm 28. And for the first time in my life, I'm not my family's walking credit score. I'm just me. And that, finally, is enough.